Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Got a whole bench full of parts here. We're about to build a pinion drive for 1113, so we need to take all these pieces and get them onto this engine before this video is through. Looks like a lot, but all of these pieces are going to consolidate pretty quickly. It's actually fairly simple. A couple of sub-assemblies are going to go together first, so we might as well pick up where we left off with the last video. I was soaking the pinion sleeve in the Evapo-Rust because it was one seized up block. That stuff did the job. I left it in there for about 2 days, took it out, just kind of rinsed it off, and everything just came right apart. Everything looks awesome except for the latch spring. The old one came out in 5 pieces. It was already junk, but luckily 2115 had a good spring for us, so Grandpa bails me out again. So to get the sleeve back together, I've started with putting grease on all the pivot points. I've got grease on the latch pins. I'll also apply a little bit to the sliding surfaces of the latches. You don't want corrosion to take over and start sticking these things. Get some on these teeth in here. And we're going lighter on the details with this. I have covered these things in great depth in other videos on the channel before, so we're just gonna get this one put back together. So I've already got the tension screw preloaded in this one. I'll just start by throwing this in, take the pin, install like that. Now we'll take the latch spring, and I like to put a pretty good coating of assembly grease on these too. Like I say, you can't get in to lubricate these once everything is put together, so I like to make sure it has plenty of residual. And even in operation, this stuff really can't find its way out. So latch spring goes in that hole at the top there. Second latch is greased, ready to go in. Start the spring through the threaded hole for the screw, and then make sure they are connected to one another down inside, down in here. That is what makes them pivot in unison. Drop the other pin in. There we go. Now we can start the second latch screw. These, of course, are what tension the latch spring to get these things to release at just the right time. And what I'll do for a starting point is just put each one of these screws flush with the face of the latch. That seems to be a pretty good starting point. They can then be locked in with a cotter pin, and we're not going to make these permanent for now. I'm just going to bend those legs out just enough so that they don't fall out, because the final latch adjustment is going to happen when we do the first start of the diesel engine. So we're just keeping those pins in enough to retain our starting point for now. And I've also put the cotter pins in the other 2 latch pivot pins. I did that off camera. So there, first sub-assembly done. We are finished with the pinion latch. So the other sub-assembly we're going to put together is this whole shift fork for the clutch and brake collar. We had to replace this casting due to the old one being broken. I'm sure you guys remember that from the last episode. So I had a quick question about how I took this apart, because the shaft that goes in here is captured on each end by a cup plug, and it's really difficult to get these out. You really can't go in and grab onto them at all. But the way I disassemble these, the bore that the shaft rides in is smaller in diameter than the bore that the cup plug seats in. I think you can see the shoulder right around in there. That's the step transition. So what I do before I take anything apart, I'll take a punch. This is one of the old plugs that I had to sacrifice, and I will drive one plug in deeper beyond the plug bore down into that smaller diameter shaft bore. And what that does, you can see from the witness marks, it crunches it down and makes it smaller. At that point, I can just knock on the fork, since the fork is pinned to the shaft, and that shaft pops that thing right out. Of course, you have to sacrifice a plug to do it, but that's not a problem for me. I have a lot of these sitting around. I can get a plug out of another one. So that's how I take those apart. Now when we put this together, we have to pay attention because the shaft and fork are pinned together with this taper pin, and it's probably impossible to see on camera, but the end up by my finger is larger in diameter than the end that's down by my thumb. Very slight taper to that. So the holes in these pieces are correspondingly tapered, so you want to make sure that the two large holes are on the same side and the two small holes are on the same side. So, and when you insert this taper pin, it has to come in through that plug hole right there. That's really the only main purpose for that that plug, is to provide you access to put this pin in. So we will start the shaft, get it through the fork, roughly center it, make sure those holes are aligned. You guys aren't going to be able to see it most likely on the camera. Use this little pick to line everything up. There we go. It should be enough to start the pin. So the small point goes in, just fits through that hole. And with the housing secured in the vise, we can use this punch and hammer to run that taper pin home. Just about there. There. It's looking good. I'll tap those cup plugs in on each end of the shaft now. And install the pipe plug. Alright, now that we're done with the vise, I can take the small fork that actuates the big fork, put it into the housing. Don't you just love the way these things are put together? Woodruff key goes in the slot in the shaft out here. And now the clutch handle goes on. Line the keyway. That. Tighten the pinch bolt and check it for full range of movement. And you know what I love about this thing? They even counterweighted the lever so that it's not putting tension on the clutch. Oh my gosh, I love these things. I want to shake that guy's hand that engineered that lever. So that is the second sub-assembly finished. Alright, now we can finally start assembling components to the shaft. So we'll start with that back bearing and the seal sleeve. Both of these will get pressed on. Alright, back from the press, I can get a little bit of assembly grease on the bushing surface for the clutch drum. So we'll put the clutch drum on now. Spins nice. I'm also going to apply a little bit of grease to these 3 Woodruff keys that go around the shaft in here. That grease will help to hold those keys in position. Rotate around to the next one. A little bit of grease. Repeat for the third and final key. Here we go. I can start building the clutch stack now. So we'll start with the rear pressure plate. Once I can get that one over those 3 keys, they should pretty well stay put. There we are. We'll put a bronze disc in there, followed by a steel and a bronze. Make sure the bevels all go the same way if you so choose to do that. Just keep alternating bronze, steel, bronze, steel. and the final steel disc. And this question came up in the comment section. It looks like it's the lock plate for the Spider, but it's not. It's just because it's been underneath the lock plate for the Spider, and all those holes transferred witness marks onto this top steel. So that was one question that I answered under the last video. Finish it all off with the lock plate. Spider assembly threads on next. To lift up on the plunger because it's wanting to engage with the holes in the lock plate already. Okay. Sliding collar down on top of the Spider. And we don't have much of a snap there yet. I'll just advance it one more spot. Go a little more. A little more. We'll just sneak up on it. It's getting better. Try a couple, maybe that's too far. Still a little bit loose. Go one more. Okay, that's about all you're going to be able to do by hand. Just enough to lock the clutch in. Once you put this in and have the lever on there at this adjustment right here, you're not even going to feel over center snap once you have leverage, but this is just going to keep that clutch stack locked together. I like how it springs apart. It will break that viscous drag, help the brake to work a lot better. So now we can set this down on its side. Alright, I decided to transition back to the vise because this is going to give everybody the best view of the brake system up in here. I could have done this on the bench, but since none of these pieces were present during the disassembly, I decided to put it back over here. So I've just got the lower hex portion of the shaft clamped in the soft jaws for now. So first thing I'm going to do is pop the little Woodruff key in up here. And then the brake disc hub can go on. Now the brake discs, 5 total. Let me get around here, make sure you can see this. We have 3 of the inner spline ones and just 2 of the outer spline ones. These are all steel because friction is your friend with these. So, and that's where the little feet that are on the bottom of these splined areas on the hub come in handy. They will hold those discs from falling all the way down. Just alternate inner spline, outer spline, inner spline, outer spline, and finish it off with the final inner. That is your brake disc pack. End plate can go on next, as well as the bearing. Luckily this bearing has been a very good fit into that plate. So we drop the plate down, we have to align the notches here with the tabs that are on the outsides of the outer discs. Start the bearing on the shaft. Alright, plate is down, engaged with the discs. I just need to help that bearing out a little bit. Finally, tighten the nut, lock it in place with a cotter pin. And with that, we've got the bulk of the pinion shaft assembled. And really, it looks like there's a lot more going on here than what there really is. You just have the shaft, the seal sleeve, bearing, clutch drum, you have pressure plate with clutch discs, lock plate, Spider, sliding collar, brake hub in there, brake discs, brake plate, front bearing, and nut. Really not a lot to it. It looks kind of busy, but it's really not. And the elegance of the system is in the sliding collar here. When it slides forward, it applies pressure to the brake discs, stops the pinion shaft from spinning. When it slides back, locks in over center, applies the clutch, and powers the shaft. It's really that simple. I mean, whoever dreamed this thing up, I think kind of did a good job. So before I put the shaft into the housing, I need to address the front seal. The Caterpillar number is a 2A3688. I crossed that over to a CR or SKF 20098. Specs on that, 2-inch shaft for a 3.189 bore. CLOD is 3.194 and it is 0.469 wide. Nice heavy duty seal. And with it installed, I'm just about ready to put the shaft into the housing. I'll take the gasket that goes behind the plate right here. Again, I just make all these gaskets. I don't bother trying to buy them. So it just fits over the assembly right up like that. So now I can just carefully guide the shaft into the housing. The only thing to watch for is that I don't roll the lip on the seal out here when the collar slides through it. I just remain careful and take my time, make sure the gasket doesn't fall out of place like it just did. Get the plate turned around because there's a little dowel pin on this end. Just a few taps to seat this front bearing home. Everything looks good. Seal lip came through just fine. I gave that some extra attention as that collar was starting to poke through to make sure I didn't roll it. You don't want that spring to pop out from behind there. So that's looking good. Next step, we can get the fold over lock and the nut put out here to make that permanent. I always replace these fold over locks. Here is the current number 4B7271 from Caterpillar. That should be the one that I need. There we go. Use my spanner wrench to tighten this notched nut. We didn't do hammers and chisels like happened to this poor thing the last time. Again, just held the hex portion of the shaft in the vise here with the soft jaws. That seems to work best for this. Just finishing up folding the last of the lock tabs. I like these fold over locks because if you can't get two of the tabs lined with two of the notches, the other two usually are. So it's pretty versatile. You can get that thing pretty much wherever it tightens in. You'll have lock tabs available to utilize, and the other ones that don't line up, you can just leave them flat. So pretty easy. All right, just finishing up, putting some grease inside the pinion gear. We're ready to start assembling all of this stuff now. So the gear goes on first. And if you have any questions about what I'm going to do here, I've already made a video showing how to basically time your latch nut with the pinion latches, all the necessary shimming, all that stuff. It's a link will be popping up right here right now. You can go and check that out if you so choose. I did it on an RD6 drive, and it's the exact same on these D2s. We'll just skip that whole thing now because I've already done an in-depth video on that, and we'll be here for another 30 minutes if I get into all that stuff. But fold over lock for the latch nut. You can see this one is missing 2 of the 4 tabs. Here is the current number, 2B1864 from CAT. You can see that one's all well and good in there. So kick out springs go in there, inner and outer. Fold over lock beneath the latch nut. I have the kick out plunger in the nut. Compress those springs just enough to start the threads. Just cinch the nut hand tight for now. We'll take it over to the vise for the final tightening. Alright, just finished bending the last tab under the latch nut, and these things are always a compromise. Of course, every one of my fold over locks I want to have just dead perfect right on the flat, nice 90-degree bend. This one, the best position I could get was with the tabs just kind of trailing off of the edge of the flat on each side, but that is going to be a sufficient grab on that latch nut. Good part about it is, and the most important part, the way I was able to position everything, it is going to put those latches directly in line with the center of the gripping surface on that nut. That's the important thing. Make sure these things stay engaged and they're not halfway off of it on one side or the other while you're cranking the diesel engine. So always a compromise. Of course, I want to have the perfect pristine fold over lock tabs and the perfect pristine alignment of the pinion sleeve and latches. Doesn't always happen that way, but this one's good to go. We have it right where it's important. So to throw the pinion sleeve onto the gear, it originally had the bolts that have the cross-drilled heads for the locking wire. That is original, right, correct, and proper for 1113, and I usually adhere to those standards, but this is one area where the fold-over lock style bolts are much, much better than the lock wire type. The new bolts are just a little bit longer than the old lock wire versions. You can maybe see right there by about 1.5 threads to 2 threads maybe. That is to take into account the additional thickness of the fold-over locks beneath them. And as I've described in that other video that I just linked you to a minute ago about setting these up, you only have a certain amount of threads in this gear that those bolts can engage with. So having the newer style non-cross-drilled, slightly longer bolts for the fold-over locks is key. Number for these bolts is a 4H1350. These fold-over locks, I wrote it down here, 2A2468. I buy these in bulk from Floor and Tractor. That's the number I give them. Okay, that was the final lock tab. Bolts are tightened in with Loctite. Fold-over locks beneath them. Perfect one right there. Perfect one right there. Near perfect right there. Had to go on a little bit of an angle with that one, but it's important to get those run down to where they are good and tight. And if it seems like I'm going fast and skipping some steps, if you have any questions, the assembly of this whole portion here is probably going to be demonstrated in that video, again, that I linked you to just a few minutes ago on that RD6 drive. So go check that out before you start asking questions. It's probably all there. So let's just release these latches and see how they work. Okay, that's good. They snap in good, they hold, they release well, perfect. And it's just how it's supposed to work. So at this point, all we have left to put on is this side fork assembly and this end cover, and this unit is complete. But due to the space constraints on the D3400, if I'm going to get it put on the bell housing, I need to have this piece and this piece off of it to do that. So I have the gasket for the flange to bell housing made, and we also need to do something about an O-ring seal in this groove right here. So the CAT manual lists that as a 2A3676 seal, and the problem with the Caterpillar seal, the O-ring I should say, it's so big it's a horrendously tight fit. And you can see on 1113's poor old broken housing right here, it's such a tight fit that that O-ring completely conforms to the entire area of that groove, and it almost looks like there's not even an O-ring in there. Basically, from years on the forums, Old Magnet on the ACMOC bulletin board, he clued us into the fact that a regular size, trade size 340 O-ring is plenty to seal that groove right there. Granted, it's not as fat to take up that full amount of space, but when you put that on there, it is all you need, and it's a much, much better fit than the CAT one that you're just about going to have to pull this thing in with bolts to get that thing to start in. So, new O-ring in place and lubed up on the front of the housing. New gasket in place, and I've also removed these 2 upper bolts from this engine side cover. That's going to make life a lot easier for you to get that thing in there. Otherwise, that flange and the housing is going to be wanting to catch on each one of those. And I also engaged the pinion. I snapped that back in. That decreases the overall length on this thing by a few inches. Makes it a little bit easier to get it fed in through that opening. All right, get it started in. Sneak it past that governor housing back here. You can see why I left that front plate off, and then leaving that whole handle off the side also helps you quite a bit. There we go, that O-ring slides right into the bell housing bore. You don't even have to fight it. Front cover and gasket can go on now. And now, finally, last piece. If you guys are still here, I know we're going into overtime again. If I haven't lost you, if you're still awake, still paying attention, we can get this engagement lever and fork installed. New gasket under the cover. Line everything in and tighten the bolts. Alright, to wrap things up here, I'll just kind of go through the motions real quick. To fill it with oil, you remove that plug, fill the oil through there until it runs out from this plug hole right there. That is the proper oil level for this thing. And also to adjust that spider to increase or decrease your over center clutch tension, you also do it through that plug hole. You can see the plunger down in there and the spider. I'm pretty sure the guy that decided that was good enough was also the guy that built ships in a bottle for a hobby. He's like, what? Plenty of room right there. That's easy. So the way this works, starting engine will be right here. Its idler gear will be powering the gear that is attached to the clutch drum. So your pinion is going to be spinning away. When you go to engage it with the diesel engine, you will take the lever, tension it back. That applies pressure to the brake discs in the front of the housing up here. That stops the pinion from turning. While the pinion is stopped, you pull up on the pinion engagement lever. That will latch those pinion latches. You are now engaged with the ring gear, and then you can take the lever, pop it ahead over center. That locks up the clutch. Starting engine is now cranking the diesel. When these pinion latches are adjusted properly, they will act as flyweights when the diesel engine starts. Now that all has to do with these screws and the spring in here, the tension on them. That's why we're not making these cotter pins permanent just yet, because you're not going to know where those are going to release until this thing is fired up for the first time. So just about guaranteed we're going to have to tighten those. I like to start those a little on the loose side, because if they don't disengage when they're supposed to, it makes all the inside parts of the starting engine find their way to the outside. Once the pinion disengages and the diesel starts, release the over center clutch and you're running. That's all there is to it. So that does it for the starting pinion. Up next is the starting engine build, and that one was just as horrendously frozen and cracked and broken in all places and in all regards as the diesel engine was, but we took some pretty good parts out of it. So find a good block and start on another engine build. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please tune in for that.